So I am claustrophobic. If I get stuck in an elevator, I am not going to be a happy camper. So the idea of being in a full body MRI for 60 minutes is not something I would ever sign up for. But I have to say, I signed up for Prenuvo. I read a lot about it. I heard anecdotally that people like myself did not have issues. And I had absolutely zero issues when I sat in a Prenuvo, or when I laid down in a Prenuvo without moving for over an hour, and I watched Drive to Survive on Netflix, and it was a completely pleasant experience. And I never in a million years would have thought I would be saying that. So can we start there and talk about what you do to make that experience so pleasant for people like me who do not like small spaces?
It's a great question, and it's something that comes up a lot with folks that come in or are thinking about getting scanned. There's really two sources of claustrophobia, and we try and address both of them in the experience that we've put together at Prenuvo. The first is the feeling of anxiety people get in being in a small space, and the MRIs that we have built are very, very large. They're what's called a wide bore MRI, so much larger than an MRI that you might have experienced in a hospital setting. And then we put televisions inside there to help distract the mind as you go through the scanning process. And I think this is quite unique. There aren't that many other facilities out there that enable folks to watch streaming video while they're getting a scan. The second thing that we do is we like to address, I guess, the underlying anxiety that many people have about learning things about their health. To be clear, I don't think that this anxiety is something that is necessarily created by the individual. It's created by the healthcare system, because the system in which we all live is a system that's characterized by finding disease late. And therefore, any disease diagnosis, no matter what you get, is automatically going to be a very scary and complex and difficult and expensive and life-changing thing to have. And so everything we do around the experience is to not try and trigger some of those feelings that patients get when they go into a medical facility. So you won't find any white walls anywhere. You won't find people wearing uniforms. People are very friendly. They have time. The goal is to guide you through that experience and not trigger these feelings that the health system unfortunately has created.
Well, you knocked it out of the park. And what's so interesting, you mentioned that anxiety. My wife, Colleen, and I did it together. And she's one who typically isn't into all the testing that I do. So for example, she has no interest in doing genetic testing, but she jumped at the opportunity to do Prenuvo, which I found to be interesting. And her view was exactly yours. Well, if I want to find something now, we can actually do something about it. Well, I don't want to find something. If there is something to find, I would prefer to find it now so I can actually do something versus waiting to, I can't do anything.
Well, the closest feeling I have, I mean, when I did my first scan, I had a certain level of anxiety, less so about being claustrophobic in a tube. I used to go caving when I was back in college, so I'm quite familiar with small spaces. But I was anxious about what the scan might find. And the closest feeling I had was probably this idea of, I've traveled around the world and lived in different countries, and I've fallen behind on my checkups with the dentist. Sort of like going to the dentist not having been for 3 or 4 years. It's a little bit more anxiety inducing than, if you're heading to the dentist for your regular 6-monthly checkup. But the idea is once you do it once, that people think of us like the dentist for the rest of your bodies, a routine check, so you never have to really worry about what's going on with your health. And for scan 2, 3, 4, and beyond, the level of anxiety drops almost to zero for most people.
Yes. Well, I think, so to take a step back, I think most of our listeners are probably familiar with Prenuvo and many of whom have probably done a scan. I think there's a large group of people who are considering it. And for those who are unfamiliar, maybe let's take a step back. I went straight to claustrophobia because I was just so impressed. We'll take a step back. What is Prenuvo? What does it test for? And talk about some of the science and technology and what exactly it does for people who are unfamiliar.
Sure. So Prenuvo is a clinical diagnostic quality whole body exam that we do with custom built research grade MRI machines that enable us to image your body about 3 to 4 times faster than a regular MRI, while still maintaining very, very high image quality. The scan itself is capable of detecting solid tumors at stage 1. So these most tumors, with the exception of leukemia or very early lymphoma, we're able to detect other killer conditions like aneurysms in various parts of the body. And then probably another 400 or 500 conditions that, if left unattended, may, over the course of someone's life, end up becoming chronic conditions that can seriously affect health span later in life.
What's an example of one of those?
Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is where liver deposits abnormally where fat deposits abnormally in the liver. And we often see a big genetic component to this. So patients that might be quite fit and active and don't look like they're overweight actually sometimes learn that they have severe fatty liver, and they have to be very careful about what they eat, even though they are exercising and are active. Another example would be spinal conditions. And we see this a lot, actually, as we've expanded. And as the average age of patients has come down, we are routinely screening patients in their 20s, and they already look like they have a spine of a 40-year-old. And that doesn't necessarily mean they have pain. And for some of them, depending on how wide or narrow their spinal canal is, they may never have pain. But knowing this 10, 20 years before pain might present gives the patient an opportunity to really make lifestyle changes so that it never arrives at a chronic, debilitating condition that affects mobility and ultimately longevity.
Yes, I had a spinal finding I will talk about when we get to Colleen and I's findings. So what are the limitations? How far, where can it go?
We are, at the company, at its heart, really sort of geeks around this technology. And so when we first started these screenings, the average examination took about 1 hour and 45 minutes. About 5 years ago, we got it down to 1 hour 10. Today, we're about 45 minutes. And it's hard to compare because whenever we bring the time of the scan down through better hardware or through better image acquisition protocols, or often through AI these days, we then find ways to increase the coverage of the scan itself. So the one thing that the scan is perhaps not so good at right now is cardiovascular disease, which obviously is something that concerns a lot of folks. We see the end organ damage from this, but we don't image the heart directly. We're working on technology to be able to do that over the next year or two. And more broadly, just make this one scan as comprehensive for as many conditions as we can.
So for the heart, you do get an overview of the heart, because I'll talk about Colleen's sheet of finding there. So talk about the heart specifically, and what does it show and what does not show for those who want to.
Challenge with the heart is it's always beating, and you're also breathing. So we can gate for one of those two things, but to try and gate for both ends up taking a lot of time. And so we can view the aorta, which is often where we find aortic aneurysms, because it's not moving as much as the heart is. We can see the end organ damage from bad plumbing in our bodies. So if a patient has metabolic disease or cardiovascular disease, what we tend to see is a reduction in blood flow to certain organs. And the brain in particular is very sensitive to blood flow. And so we start seeing a condition called small vessel ischemia often, which is small sort of patches of brain cells, that brain regions that have died off from lack of oxygen. And so when we start to see these warning signs, we often will recommend to patients, there's something going on with your plumbing here, most likely cardiovascular, you should go and do these other tests as well. So the body is really interesting. It's not a collection of parts, it's an interconnected system. And so sometimes we can learn a lot about how an organ like the heart is functioning by looking at other parts of the body.
So it sounds like you can pick up some structural issues with the heart, and you can also pick up a potential blood clot before it actually happens.
Correct. Another example of a structural issue in the heart is we can often identify severe valve problems because we see a backing up of fluid either in the lungs or in the lower extremities. And this often indicates that there's a problem with the way that the heart is pumping blood. So again, one interconnected system, not a collection of parts. And that's the difference in screening the entire body in one go versus just looking at individual body parts, which is how our current health system tends to think of ourselves.
Yes. And so in terms of the data, what can you share? You've been doing this for more than a couple of years. What's very common? What's very uncommon in terms of the findings?
Wow. I mean, we've seen absolutely everything. I mean, most people have strange but benign lesions in their body. So these are often cysts, which are fluid, almost like internal pimples But unlike
I had some of those.
unlike pimples on our skin, they just sometimes just keep growing, or they can be very stable. You can have them there your entire life. Hemangiomas would be another type of lesion. This is almost like a port wine birthmark, but on the inside of your body. So an abnormal collection of blood vessels that oftentimes we'll have from birth. These are very, very common. Everyone has spine problems of one shape or another, particularly cervical spine. And in terms of abnormal conditions, we have, it's incredible when you look inside. We see people that think they have 2 functioning kidneys, and we tell them they only have 1. And in fact, 1 kidney is atrophied and completely disappeared.
Wow. So you can pick up kidney disease.
Oh, absolutely. We find women, every once in a while, we find women that have I forget the medical term, but a duplex uterus, where they actually have 2 uteri that are either partially or completely sort of disconnected, and that can affect, obviously, fertility. And of course, a whole host of different congenital abnormalities, which often don't mean that much medically, but just help us appreciate how unique all of us are.
Yes, I very much appreciated that from the findings. The categorization. I think the categorization was informational, and I had a number of findings where nothing to do here, but you should just know that you've got this, polyp over here or something going on over there. And I found that to be okay, nothing to do here, but like it had the size of my prostate. Nothing to do. It was normal, but here it is. When you do this again, you should see how it compares.
Well, sometimes it's really helpful because these screenings are very good at separating benign from malignant conditions. And so oftentimes when we might see a very large benign lesion in someone's liver, and just telling them, we saw this, it's benign, don't do anything about it, also might help prime them to avoid unnecessary medical treatment down the track. If someone else did an ultrasound of that liver and said, wow, there's something going on here, we should do a biopsy, or we should do more imaging, just to know that's already been imaged. It was there 10 years ago. It's stable. Don't worry about it. It's something, if I'm sick, it's something else.
And to me, I'll just jump into my personal experience. What was so fascinating is that there was a nugget of something, and it led me down this path to real discovery. And so I was fortunate enough not to have any major finding. I'm good, and I'll walk through the major, the minor things we found. And so one of the things we discovered is a small nasal polyp in the sinus area. And so it was suggested I go to an ENT. So I go to an ENT. ENT says to me, wow, you've got a severely deviated septum. You must be a terrible nasal breather. And I said, what are you talking about? I'm in health and wellness. I breathe through my nose all the time. And he's like, oh, really? He's looking at me. He says, he pulls out he says, let's look at the mirror. And he says, breathe through your nose. So I'm going to do it now for those on YouTube. You'll see my right nostril completely collapses. It's called nasal valve collapse. And I'm just like, oh my God, is this a injury from playing basketball in college, or you get banged around? He's like, no, I think you've had this your entire life. And in terms of surgery, it's complex and something I probably don't want to do. And the doctor agreed, and he said, you know what? I think you should try some nasal strips and see what happens. And so sure enough, I go buy some nasal strips, very inexpensive, pick them up on, at any drugstore, put them on at night. And I say, wow, this is what it's like to really breathe through my nose. It's really opened up. This is game changing. And that night, I'm a good sleeper, but I'm usually low on deep, and I'm good on REM if I look at my aura score. The next day, it's the first day. Wow, I'm in the green on both. This is amazing. I had no idea. And it was, it got me thinking, very minor finding, but led me to the ENT and discover I had this condition that in some way has been affecting my quality of sleep for my entire life. And I never knew.
Yeah. Well, I think, and what I like about that story, by the way, is not just the condition itself, but that these scans really enable physicians to spend way less time trying to figure out what's going on with their patients. And they actually can now focus on, how do I make their health better? Which is why physicians got into medicine in the first place. And that's lost in our healthcare system, where it takes so long to diagnose something, or a lot of these, I say, like low level symptom, there's low level diseases that affect quality of life but don't present acutely often never get diagnosed in the healthcare system.
100%. And then the other, you mentioned everyone's got spinal issues. And so I'm no stranger there. And it was determined I had very slight scoliosis around the L3 vertebrae. And you had to really zero out on the report. Like if you were zooming in, you almost didn't see it. It was very slight. So I go to my chiropractor and I send her everything, send the MRI, and she said, and she's worked on me before. She says, it's so slight. I didn't even pick it up when I was treating you. And we had talked, and because of a dislocated shoulder and, I sleep on one side. And so I've been sleeping this way for probably 25 years. And so it's a little thing, it's slight, but I don't want it to be major. So now we're adjusting how I'm sleeping and using a pillow and doing a little PT because one side's clearly stronger than the other. I don't want this little very slight to get very large because that can start to hit on organs and become much more problematic. So just a little thing, a little finding, but I'm working on it.
Yeah, we find also, of course, we're told to work on our core a lot, and a lot of the focus on that is sort of non-specific, but that's really important for our back because generally think of our back as almost like a tent pole, and you have these two sort of like muscle groups on both sides that are supposed to weigh it down evenly. And what we have in society today is we have very strong muscles down our backs, but not very strong core abdominal muscles. And so the tent is sort of tilted one way. And over time, that can create a lot of these spinal conditions that patients are experiencing.
Yeah. And again, when it's minor, when it's in an early stage and you're fit and healthy, there's a lot you can do about it. If it becomes major and maybe you're struggling with your health, it becomes a lot more difficult to course correct. So to me, the findings were blessings. And then my wife, Colleen, had a little bit more of a serious finding. She found she has a dilated aorta, which was, I think, at 4 centimeters, which is borderline, which, she's getting checked out with a cardiologist, and we're still going through that process. But the early read is, something you want to keep on track of is 4, staying 4, no big deal. But if 4 becomes 5 and so on, that could become problematic. It caused her to have a conversation with her dad because her dad has the same condition. How big is yours? And he says 5, no big deal. So different, like maybe we should have had this conversation, maybe encourages conversations between, your parents, you see what's going on there. But that's a bigger one, but something to stay on top of and really critical. We're talking about the heart. That's a big one. And she's in great shape.
Yeah. I mean, these are, for your listeners, the worry is always these can evolve into aneurysm. And we can think of aneurysm as almost like a weakening of the arterial walls. And oftentimes it starts to look like a little balloon. And as anyone that's blown up a balloon knows, the hardest part is getting started. But once you get started, the balloon can grow quite fast. And that's sort of what the concern is with aneurysms. But what we're also finding as we image more and more people is that there's probably a much wider range of congenital arterial dilation that we're just starting to understand. And I think that's going to help us improve over time how we follow up these findings. And the benefit of the scan, frankly, is that we're imaging on the same machines at the same quality that every part of the body from one year to the next, we can look at change over time and we can identify a very small change that helps us understand whether this is a stable condition or whether this is a condition that's growing and becoming more concerning.
And so in terms of, I think the one that, in many ways, I think the story of Maria Menounos got a lot of publicity. One would say Prenuvo saved her life because she discovered someone is very healthy, early stages of pancreatic cancer. And that's a very rare one, very rare. I think it's 1.5%, but very low survival, 12.5%. Because the rub is you typically catch it in the later stage and there's not much you can do, but you caught it early. Can you talk more about pancreatic and some of the rare findings where you truly save people's lives?
Sure. Well, for reasons that we're not entirely certain, the rate of cancer incidence is growing, and particularly growing in younger people. And some of the cancers that are growing sort of the quickest include pancreatic cancer and colon cancer. And oftentimes these are cancers that are caught quite late and don't have great prognosis. The other two cancers that we're seeing more often than we would like to, and often lead to life-saving diagnoses, are ovarian cancer and lung cancer in women that never smoked before. And again, no one really knows the reason why. Is this hormonal? Is it environmental? But oftentimes, lung and ovarian cancer are caught usually when they're metastatic, and the prognosis is quite poor. So these are all organs for which there is no standard of care screening in average risk people in the population. And so without screening like Prenuvo, really you're left to waiting until symptoms present, and that's often when it's too late.
And so what else? You mentioned in a couple of years, you're going to be able to go a lot deeper on the heart. What else do you expect on the technology side in terms of advancement?
Well, one thing that we're working on, to be honest, is working with AI to help identify very, very small changes in our body as we age, and being able to compare that with what we understand to be normal for a certain age. So, for example, to look at your brain and understand how your brain volume, the pattern of perfusion of blood in the brain, the shape of the outside corticals of the brain, how all of these compare to people of your biological age, and to be able to tell you how you're tracking. Do you look like you have a brain of a 6-year-old, or do you look like you have a brain of a 30-year-old? And we're working through analyzing every organ in the body to help understand what your physiological age is relative to your biological age. And what we learn is everyone typically has something they have to work on. Someone might have a great brain, but they have bad spine. Or someone has a bad spine, but they, a great spine, but they have a bad liver. So, it helps us really understand what to focus on very early in sort of in our lives, so that we don't arrive in our 60s and 70s with chronic conditions.
And how far away do you think that is?
Well, those things have to go through FDA approval. So that's the main hurdle here. Being able to sort of work through a regulatory process for sometimes quite novel AI algorithms, and that just takes time. But every year the FDA is more open to this. The process is becoming more clear. And we hope even by the end of the year, we'll have the first set of these models that help us understand how our organs are changing, how our distribution of muscle is changing around the body, and how our distribution of fat is changing around the body as we age. And those are really, really interesting drivers of overall health.
So essentially, a DEXA scan to some degree could be everything you would find in a DEXA, you would find in a Prenuvo?
A DEXA scan on steroids possibly is a good way to describe it, because the quality of the imaging and obviously the volumetric work that we're able to do with MRIs is pretty incredible relative to a DEXA scan.
Can you throw in a VO2 max into that to save people that, exhaustive treadmill, which I'm afraid to do?
We are, I'll talk to the team about this. We're excited to expand into different modalities, but to be honest, what we do with MRI is really hard to do. And we're a world leader at this. We want to make sure that we continue to focus on pushing this core technology as far as we're able to. But when we ask you to hold your breath inside the machine, we can tell a lot about how your breathing is just by looking at how your lungs compress.
And so is that something, if you're already doing it, is that just something you haven't decided to share? So it sounds like you're already collecting that.
Yeah, VO2 max is it's gold standard, and it's not that difficult to do. So I don't know that we'll ever replace that test. But as we look at all of the image data that we're collecting, we do sort of feel that we're only scratching the surface of what we're able to tell you about your health. As we image more patients and start to be able to understand how what we're seeing correlates with disease, we believe that we'll discover new biomarkers and be able to provide more and more information about things that people never imagined MRI would be able to sort of help us understand.
My personal view is many of the biological testing out there, age tests, aren't that great. This sounds a lot more accurate to me because you're really going underneath the hood.
To give you an example with brain age, so the largest database of highly detailed brain images is a database called ADNI. And actually started in Australia, where I'm from. And it's been going for many years. But these are brain images of patients that typically have cognitive decline and oftentimes have Alzheimer's. So it's a very, very wonderful, detailed database of quite diseased brains. So that's not particularly useful in helping us understand the very, very early stages of cognitive decline. And what's really fascinating is, we're scanning patients as young as 20 and as old as 100. And we have all different types of brains, from completely normal to, slightly diseased to very diseased. And so these models that we're able to build on top of this, we hope will be a lot more accurate than some of the models built on the existing data out there.
So it sounds like you can pick up on cognitive decline before it happens.
Well, we know, working backwards, when you see someone that has Alzheimer's, if you image their brain, you'll see that there's been a lot of brain atrophy. And if you go a little bit further back in time, you start to understand where that brain atrophy starts, which is typically in the hippocampal region. And if you look at some of the blood sensitive sequences that we take, you understand that the hippocampal region is a region of the brain that doesn't ordinarily have great blood flow. It's sort of in between the major highway networks of the brain, as far as blood is concerned. And so it's the first region of the brain that, if your blood flow is diminished, it's the first region that's going to be affected.
Mm-hmm.
What happens when you disrupt blood flow is you get atrophy of the brain tissue. But even before then, when you start to get variable blood flow problems, we start to see a flattening of the corticals on the outside of the brain. So we're learning more and more about earlier and earlier biomarkers, and we can then use those biomarkers to help people understand if and where they are in a progression of a brain volume loss and brain decline. And we've learned over time now that the average brain shrinks about 3% per decade. And the question is, well, how is your brain changing? Is it shrinking faster than 3%? Is it not shrinking at all? And we know that there are diet and lifestyle interventions that can improve outcomes here. But oftentimes the problem is patients don't know where they are on that spectrum.
Yes. And just to give folks an idea of how comprehensive the test is, I got my findings up here. So there's brain, sinuses and mastoids. Then we go down to the nasal pharynx, oral pharynx, hypothyrox, thyroid, cervical lymph node chain, lungs and median, I don't even know what these things, mediastinum, heart and great vessels, esophagus, stomach, liver, gallbladder, and biliary system,
Biliary system. Mm-hmm.
pancreas, spleen, kidneys, adrenals, bowel, bladders and uterus, prostate and male reproductive organs, spine. What do we have? I have a lot in my spine. Sacroiliac joints. Yeah, there you go. SI joints, that I know. Shoulders, pelvis and hips, knees, ankles. So, okay, here's my one pet peeve. I'm 6'7", so my ankles were not visible in your scan due to my height. But again, I know most of your customers are not 6'7", and I already know my right ankle is a complete mess from a bad sprain. So I didn't need to be told that.
Well, we optimize for, the whole idea is to optimize for things that can affect lifespan and health span. And generally speaking, there's not a lot that can cure in your ankles.
I hear you, but also 6'7" and an MRI, I'm not your average customer. And the last one was bony skeleton and soft tissue. It is comprehensive. So for those listening, or a lot of health forward folks are skeptical of technology. They embrace technology and skeptical specifically around, people concerned about radiation. So what do you say for those who are concerned about radiation?
Well, this is an easy one to answer because the modality that we use, MRI, doesn't involve ionizing radiation. So you're not subject to radiation when you're in the machine. We don't inject any heavy metal contrast that sometimes you get with a single body part scan. So these scans are designed to be safe and something that you could do, as frequently as you need to. But no, you could sleep in this machine and it wouldn't affect your health. They're very, very safe.
There you go. So cost. Can you walk through cost and the different options? I chose for the full body for everything, but you don't have to do that.
No, we have a torso cancer scan that something like 80 to 90% of cancers that we get are in the torso. So this is a pretty comprehensive scan for cancer that costs $999. We have a head and torso scan that's $17.99. And then we have the comprehensive exam that I would say the overwhelming majority of people do, which is $24.99. And the comprehensive scan screens not only for cancer, but for all of these other conditions. And it's designed to be sort of like a 500-point checkup for your body. And oftentimes patients do this every year or two, or sometimes they do the comprehensive and then come back for a torso cancer scan, the following year, and alternate between these different scans. Before Prenuvo existed, to do a whole body clinical diagnostic quality MRI exam would cost $50,000 to $75,000, depending on the institution you went to. So these are orders of magnitude cheaper than what was out there before we started the company. And we hope over the next 5+ years that we're able to bring the comprehensive exam down to below $1,000 as well. Our goal is to make it as available to as many people as possible so we can save as many lives as we can.
And what about those, I'm sure that you get this question a lot, insurance coverage?
So it's not covered by the moment by insurance plans. We're actively running clinical trials to collect the type of evidence that insurance companies and health systems are looking for to one day hopefully have these scans covered as standard of care. Our thought here is, there's a lot of unknowns, and obviously health systems don't move very fast and they want a lot of evidence. But at Prenuvo, our core belief here is that if we had a health system that was at its core built on top of preventative precision medicine, not only would we create a lot of good in the world, but we would have a health system that was much leaner than the very bloated system we have today.
100%. And I really can't imagine. I know insurance tends to move slowly. I also know that they tend to be motivated by the bottom line and the amount of savings of catching an issue, whether it's a minor issue or a major issue like pancreatic cancer stage 1. The savings is just my trillions of dollars. I'm taking a guess here in terms of astronomical.
I believe so. I mean, our health system is $5 trillion today, and we spend 3.5% of that on preventive healthcare. What the health system of the future might look like is it's 50% spent on preventive healthcare, but 80% of things that were previously acute conditions that our health system managed at great expense, you wouldn't have to ever have treated because they would have been managed through lifestyle modification. That's the world that we would like to build. I don't know that there are a lot of people that speak out from time to time about whole body screening, and a lot of that is based on understandings of how whole body screening was attempted 20 or 30 years ago. But our health system also has a very strong status quo bias, which in the context of new pharma drugs or things that could be quite dangerous, that makes a lot of sense. But in the context of screening for health, I mean, the current annual physical exam where a patient lays their hands on you and feels around to see if anything feels unusual, I mean, that was invented by the Egyptians, 2500 BC. So a lot has happened in the last 5,000 years, and we believe it's time to really overhaul the physical exam as well.
100%. And look, I've read some of the criticisms of Prenuvo and some of the other full body scans, and I don't buy it at all. I really don't. And our field is not perfect. I'll say that. And there can be criticisms of other technologies, but I think this one is really compelling. If you have the resources to spend the money, and that's a big one for people. And for everyone listening, we're going to have a code. We'll link to it in the show notes. I think it's $300 off. We'll link to it. So everyone, I encourage, if you do have the resources, get the scan. But assuming someone has the resources, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, no, I don't really understand it. And to be honest, the folks that are coming in represent a much wider demographic of people that you might expect outside in are interested in these scans. I think there's this perception that these sort of screening are for the Oura ring wearing, Fitbit.
I'm one of those guys, but yes.
Yes, I'm describing you. But, what we see in the clinics are folks that might have had cancer and they're worried that it might come back. They have a strong family history of disease, and not being screened for them is causing them anxiety. They might have indeterminate symptoms. And our health system, although it's very good at diagnosing acute problems, like you break your arm, it's pretty easy for our system to tell you broke your arm. But when you have indeterminate migraines, or particularly for women that have these sort of indeterminate abdominal pain, which is often ignored by our healthcare system, these are the people that we're seeing day in and day out in the clinics. And these are people that are looking and saying, you know what, my health is important to me. I think of this like I think of going and buying, a gym membership or buying organic food at the supermarket. This is something I'm going to do for my health, and I'll leave my health insurance and the healthcare system to, be there as the backstop that I hope I never need. Actually,
could save your life, or it could make you a better, or make you go pick up some nasal strips for $10, like myself. But either way, there, I think. Look, it is so comprehensive, and I highly recommend it to anyone who has the resources and really takes their health seriously. And I think the other You think about everyone's got a family history. If you cancer, heart disease, cognitive decline, those are some pretty big ones. Everyone's got something in their family they're not proud of. And to have that peace of mind, in my view, it's completely worth it.
Yeah, Jason, I mean, I read a little bit about your backstory. You're in banking, and then you started mindbodygreen. And I feel like all of us, we do this for different reasons. I can say when I did this, how I first got involved was I worked too hard and I didn't sleep enough and I didn't exercise as well as I would have liked to. And I remember looking up one day in the mirror and saying, well, I'm doing all this for some sort of future. Am I going to be around for that future that I'm trying to create here? And so really it's about providing this scan, if anything, is just providing us with information that we can act on so that we understand how the way we're living our lives is affecting our underlying physiology.
Yes.
Because I wouldn't want to work so hard if I found out that I had some crazy serious condition. Turns out I'm generally healthy. And so let's keep trying to change the world. So for me, even it's something of an insurance policy to make sure that the investments I'm making today for the future are investments that I should be making. And if not, then better to know it earlier rather than later and sort of refocus, because maybe I don't have great luck in my health, or maybe I have bad genetics that I have to sort of work much harder to overcome. So people also use the scan for different reasons. It's not just health and fitness nuts. It's just average folks that want to have more information about their health.
That's incredible. Well, other than people running out to go sign up for their scan, which I encourage people to do if they have the resources and are curious to do so, is there anything we didn't cover today that you'd like to go over? Any words of wisdom or advice you leave the audience with?
I mean, only just to say this is for many people, the first opportunity they have to get to really know the inner them and to learn what makes us all unique and get to build a much more intimate relationship with, as you described, every organ of the body. And I think for people that are used to waking up in the morning and looking in the mirror, they know where every mole is on the outside of their body, but have very little idea what's going on inside. For me, it's created a completely different relationship with my body. I know what I do now, and I know exactly what impact that's going to have on my physiology. And it maybe helps me think twice about some of the bad choices I've made historically, and helps me get a little bit more excited and serves as a catalyst for positive change in my health as well. So I encourage people that are able to reach out, and very excited to sort of share that same journey I had with as many people as possible.
Well, congratulations. It really is game changing. And I look forward to doing my scan again in a couple of years. It really is incredible. So thank you.
No worries. Thanks for having me.
I want to take a moment to invite you into our mindbodygreen ecosystem, where you can explore the infinite possibilities of health and well-being. All you have to do is click the subscribe button to hear more thought-provoking interviews with leaders in the health space. I am so grateful for all of you who have tuned in over the years, and let me tell you, it's only going to get better.